Okay, welcome back to my channel. I'm Riley. I know this video is like really late, really late. Like it is currently almost February and I'm just now doing my 5-star reads for 2023. But you know, better late than never, I guess. Yeah, so we're gonna go through all the books that I gave 5 stars in 2023. The beginning of 2023 was really slow for me. I actually was in Australia at this time. Yes, I am better than you. I was in Australia visiting friends and I didn't read that much, but I got a couple books in. First book I gave 5 stars was In a Jam by Kate Canterbury, but this one I loved. Oh my gosh, it was so cute. Pretty much what it is a grumpy, I don't know if it's grumpy sunshine per se, but that FMC, she just found out that her fiance, she was about to walk down the aisle and finds out that her fiance sucks, which she was kind of getting the feeling this isn't great. She comes from a really high up influential family, and the last minute she decides to leave him, finds out that her great aunt who raised her died and left the whole farm to her in this super tiny town in Rhode Island, which I love. I've never been to Rhode Island, but it's Rhode Island and Maine. I have these romanticized thoughts of them, and so if anything takes place in either of those places, I'm gonna want to read about it. But in the clause of this will is she has to be married within a year in order to actually have the land. So she's going through all this stuff, decides to go to the farm, and who does she happen to run into but her childhood best friend, who was the farm next door. And oh, he is so fine. She doesn't remember him as this super attractive man. She remembers him as this really shy, quiet guy who would drive her to school, who was just her friend, and he's grown up. Plus, he has a kid. We love single father. We love single parent. We love it. And then, you know, he's been in love with her, of course, this whole time. And he sees her and he's so mad that she's there, but not because you abandoned me. No, it's because I hate that you're here and you're bringing up these feelings that I thought it was over and I can't deal with this. But she just thinks he hates her until he's finds out about the clause in the will, and he's I'll marry you. It's yeah, I'll marry you if I get a piece of the land. If you're looking for a really easy, fast romance that's all the vibes, I highly recommend. She's also a teacher, which I find really cute, and she wears really funky earrings, which I thought was adorable. I don't know, that's such a Miss Frizzle move, you know? Love that book. It was really good. 5 stars. Next book I read and I gave 5 stars was The Summer of Broken Rules by K.L. Walther? K.L. Walther? I do not remember giving this 5 stars, but apparently I did. I don't even think I finished this. But I do remember really enjoying reading this. Pretty much it has a lot of themes of grief and going through grief and then coming together as a family after not seeing each other since the grief began. FMC is going through the grieving process of grieving her sister and her family. She comes from a very large family, and her cousin is getting married, and so they all reunite at the family it's a ranch, I think, but it's, again, this takes place on the East Coast. I can't remember where. It's giving Coos Bay vibes, you know, but they have this big family ranch that they own, and there's it's a big old camp with the ocean and tons of land, and everybody has their own cabin or house, and they all come together here and they end up playing this big game that's a tradition in the family. They end up playing the game as kind of a get to know each other up to the wedding, and then she ends up meeting the brother of the groom, and they kind of have a very cozy, flirty thing. It's very feel good, very heartfelt, And if you're reading, like, this was such a good read on the beach and like a summer vibe and just really very cozy summer, not like, but it touches into grief too, but like not so much that you're bawling your eyes out, you know, like it was heartfelt in that way. I really did enjoy this. I think I'll probably give it a reread this upcoming summer, especially I have a couple other books by her that I'm excited to read, but yes, this was a very, very cozy read for me. Like, it's so weird going back to the beginning of the year and like seeing what books I was reading, because I definitely was reading a lot of like TikTok recommendations and like the typical like series books, and it was really fun. It's just funny like going back and seeing like what I was into at the beginning of the year and what I'm like, I feel like this year already is like so different than last year. So next book I gave 5 stars was Twisted Hate. And I know this is like not a lot of people's favorite out of the Twisted series, but I don't know what it is. I loved them. I loved Josh and Jules. Did the plot itself and like stuff was not the 5 stars for me. Like, I could care less about that kind of stuff. But I really loved Jules and Josh's relationship. And I don't know, like they bantered, the like enemies to lovers was really fun. I thought like their first date was like the cutest first date I've ever seen, because he's like, she's really smart, so I'm gonna like kind of play into that. I'm gonna like give her clues and give her a scavenger hunt. Like, I was swooning. Like, if a man had ever set up a scavenger hunt for me to like go on for our first date, I would be like, put a ring on it, put it right there. I don't know, I really, really liked their relationship, even though like a lot of people are like, oh, Josh is the worst. I will say like the way he like treated the situation wasn't that great, but I still really, really liked them. The banter itself was 5 stars. I liked the rest of the Twisted series. I don't know, it just wasn't, the MCs just weren't quite like what I wanted, I would say. Maybe I need to like reread them. Like, they were great, but like I just wasn't like as obsessed, I guess. Next I read The Right Move by Liz Tomford. The Right Move by Liz Tomford was so good. This is Grumpy Sunshine and forced proximity, roommates, like a little bit like not necessarily enemies to lovers, but like not even dislike. Maybe a little dislike. The thing I loved about the MC in this book was his like love language was definitely like acts of service. And I don't know what it is, when there are books where the man is like acts of service, it makes it like 100 times better. Like, you don't see that very often, you know what I mean? Like, that's I think why I love Marietta Zapata books too, is because like it's just these guys who are just, they're so quiet and like the way they're showing love, and it's so slow, but like they're still showing it, and it's like in doing stuff for the other person. She likes coffee, but she only likes iced coffee, so every morning when he makes coffee, he'll put like a cup of it in the fridge so that when she wakes up in the morning, she can like just have cold coffee and it doesn't melt her ice cubes. Like, just little things. Like, it was just so cute. I really loved this book. Just their relationship was so good. I want to reread it so bad this year. I'm on like a big fantasy kick right now, so like once I'm done with all of those, I think I'm definitely gonna go reread some of my favorite romances. It was so good. Next book I read was Love Theoretically by Ali Hazelwood. Now, I love Ali Hazelwood so much. I've read her other 2 books about like women in STEM, and they're so good. They're so fun. Again, I love the male characters. I love the like just the really slow like build up. I don't know, they just like, they hate you, but like, do they hate you? This is definitely like academic, not necessarily rivals. Yeah, I guess a little bit. I learned so much about science when I read Ali Hazelwood books. Pretty much this book follows Elsie, and she is like not I don't know, like you can hire her to date her, right? And so she's dating the MMC's brother. And she's always been like, he doesn't trust me, he doesn't like me. Like, I always get like a little like, I don't know, like off around him because, girl, you like him. You think he's hot. He's hot. He likes her. Oh, it's so good. She always thought he was a professor, like a teacher, and he didn't think that she worked in science either. And then she ends up going to like a job interview, and he happens to be on the panel for her interview, and he's like, what are you doing here? And she's like, what are you doing here? He's like, what the heck, you're lying to my brother. And she's like, no, I'm not, 'cause I'm not dating your brother, but I can't tell you that. It's really good. It's a really good book. This is also a book I would definitely like reread. Any of Allie Hazelwood's are fantastic, but this one was definitely a 5-star for me. Switching out from romance, next book I read was Fourth Wing. I feel like everybody knows about Fourth Wing. Like, there's not like a cat, dog, or mouse that don't know about Fourth Wing, right? It was obviously the book of the year last year. Everybody talked about it. Everybody loved it. It was such a fun read. Like, I hadn't read a fantasy book in like such a long time, and then I like pulled this up and I was like, wow, this is fun. This is a good time. I'm having so much fun. And that's mostly why I gave it like 5 stars. Obviously, it's like, if you're really, really into fantasy, which like honestly I don't care, like you probably care more about like technical stuff. Like, is it the best written fantasy ever? No. But by golly, is it fun. I haven't had a book like give me a heart attack in such a long time, and this book literally gave me anxiety. I would be like freaking out while reading it, and like my heart would be pumping and I'd be breathing like what's happening. Obviously the relationship and like the romance in it was really fun, but I thought like the actual school and the like Hogwartsiness of it in a way was so much more fun, and like the dragons, it's an interesting concept, and I haven't read any like a fantasy like that in a long time. I haven't read the second book yet, but I really had fun reading this, and that's why I was like 5 stars. Like, for vibes, it's a 5, you know? Jumping back into romance, I read the Chestnut Springs series, and I loved it. It was so good. Like, really, like Elsie Silver could do no wrong. She's one of those authors that I'm like, I will read everything you ever written and I will have fun while doing it. But 2 of her books from that series are a 5-star for me, and first one is Heartless. I would die for Daddy Cade. I would do anything for Daddy Cade. Daddy Cade is daddy. That is all. That is all. I loved this book. I love the relationship. I love the like grumpy sunshine. Like, she's like kind of a wild child. There's an age gap. She's a nanny. He's like a man, you know, like in the best way, and I love him. I love him. 5 stars. The other book. Oh my gosh, I love Theo. The other one, Reckless. This book was so good. This book was so good. I feel like I love an angry woman. I love an angry woman. Like, Nesta from the A Court of Thorns and Roses is like my favorite character because of her character development, and also because she's angry. I am also an angry woman. You can't tell, obviously. Most of the time I'm great, but like I can be an angry woman. And I love seeing that written. A girl who is pissed off, but then she's like hard on the outside, but then like soft on the inside. Like, we need more women like that. You know, I love like these sunshine, happy girls, because obviously that is also like a form of armor. But I also love like women that are just mad and pissed off, and then they won't let anybody in, and everyone's like, she's a bitch. And then she meets someone who's like, I can see you. I see you, and you're not actually a bitch. You're just in pain. And that's what Theo does. I love him. So pretty much Theo and Winter end up having a one-night stand together, and then Winter gets pregnant, can't get in contact with Theo, so instead of telling him or telling anybody who the dad is. She just has a secret baby. We have secret baby. Well, she has the baby and everybody knows the baby, but she's not telling anyone who the father is. And then Theo comes to town and he's like, is that my baby? And Winter's like, yeah. And she's like, why didn't you tell me? Because you were picking up the phone. And then it was like the whole thing. He's heartbroken. But like he ends up like being like, I'm going to be the best dad that ever was. And he was. Love this. Love this man. Love this man. Next 5-star. I talk about this book so much and it's for a good reason. Like it is probably one of my favorite books from last year. The 7-Year Slip by Ashley Poston. This was so good. Pretty much what happens is Clementine aunt ends up passing away and bequeathing her apartment, which growing up her aunt always told her was magical and could slip between time, either 7 years in the past or 7 years in the future. And wouldn't you know it, once Clementine moves in, she ends up slipping 7 years in the past and ends up meeting the MMC. And it's so cool. Like, it's such a cool concept because they meet in the past and she gets to know him then, and then they end up running each other again in the present. And she's seeing the same guy but at 2 different times, and it's seeing how he's changed, but like it's all in a good way. And she's also going through this like insane like story of grief of losing her aunt and kind of putting all the pieces together that her aunt left behind, and kind of going through that process while also like falling in love with and having this super sweet romance with this man. And I think it's just such a really interesting like different book. It was so good. I have her other book, Dead Romantics, which I'm hoping to get to this year, but this one was probably, this is like 20 stars for me. So good. Next book I actually read on audiobook, and I cried so much reading this, and that is Kingdom of Ash by Sarah J. Maas. This is the final, oh my god, this book is thick. It's almost 1,000 pages. It's a little intense, but this is the final book of the Throne of Glass series, and my gosh, was it a final book. It was an insane finale. I was going through like stages of grief reading this book. I was also grieving while reading this book, but that's for another time. This series is like such a 5-star series for me. I cannot recommend it enough. I love Sarah's other series. They're great, but this one really is such a standalone and like can stand on its own 2 legs, and is just so beautiful and such an amazing fantasy world. I cannot recommend it enough. If you haven't read Throne of Glass, seriously, like, it is better than A Court of Thorns and Roses, and I don't care who comes at me for that. It's just, it is what it is. It's so good. It really is. And I loved it. Loved finishing it. I cried so much in my car listening to this book, and I'm so glad that I have finished it. I've been recently like catching up on the Crescent City books. Crescent City is really fun, and it's definitely like its own thing on its own, but like just something about Throne of Glass just is so good. Anyway, loved it. Next book is The Wall of Winnipeg and Me. I think about this book all the time. This is my first Marietta Zapata book, and it made me hooked to Marietta Zapata. I understand. I have never read a slow burn until I read Marietta Zapata. Literally, I loved this book. I loved this book. I love this. I love everything about this. Like, it was so good. Aiden Graves, he's got, like, you got my heart, boo. Boo, you and me to the end. I love him. He's like my ideal man. Like, ideally, give me that. Like, Aiden Graves, that's what I want. Like, if anyone is like, what kind of guy are you looking for? This kind of guy. I understand. He's so, like, blunt and grumpy, and he literally gives us nothing. He gives us nothing, but like once he starts giving us something, it's like everything. Everything. He's also just like big, which like throughout this whole book, it is just mentioned just how big he is. Like he's just this big wall. He's literally a wall of a man. And I love that. I love that. I love him. I love him so much. I love this book. I want to date a football player. Like, that is ideal. Pretty much what it is is you're following Vanessa, and she's worked for Aiden as his like assistant for like 2 years, and she's like, he hates me. He has never once smiled at me. Like, he does not like me, and like that kind of sucks because like I kind of have a crush on him, but like he hates me, and I'm ready to move on with my life, so I'm gonna quit. And so she tells him like, hey, I'm quitting in 2 weeks, just so you know. And he's like, okay. And so she's like, okay. And she ends up leaving earlier because she hears his manager or something, agent, insulting her and him not standing up for her. And so she's like, well, screw you, I'm gonna go, like, good luck, bye. And so she does, and she's like living her life, and it's like a couple weeks later, or no, it's not a couple weeks, I think it's like a couple months later, and she comes home one day and he's like just sitting on her porch, like sitting there waiting for her, and she's like, what are you doing here? And he's like, I need you to come back to work for me. This man starts begging for her to come back, and then he's like then explains that he's a Canadian citizen and that his visa is up at the end of the year, and he wants to stay in the States. And so he's like, well, can you marry me? Like, if you marry me, I'll pay off all your student loans. And she owes a lot of student loans, and so she ends up agreeing, and it's just so good. So good, so good. I love this book. I love Aiden Graves. I love them so much. I'm 100% going to be rereading this book later this year. So good. Last book that I gave 5 stars this year was definitely like, well, I've had this book forever, but I definitely picked it up, like reading it on a whim. I also listened to it on audiobook, and that is The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue. I don't have my cover for it because I took it off for some reason. I wasn't expecting this book to be as beautiful as it was, or as like heart-wrenching as it was. Like, it was so good. Like, it was so different than like anything I had read this year, because it was like a piece of art. Like, I felt like I was reading like real like literature, like art. Pretty much you follow Addie LaRue, who is from like 17th century France, right? And right before the French Revolution, in a little village, and she doesn't want to get married, and so she ends up begging to the gods for anything, like begging to gods, and she ends up begging to the wrong god, and he ends up, you know, being like, yeah, sure, I'll help you. And in that, she made a deal that wasn't really that good, and she ends up having to live forever with nobody remembering who she is. And it goes through like her life being this way, and her life also with the darkness, and him like taunting her, and how their lives are intertwining until you get to present day New York, and there ends up being a guy in a bookstore who remembers who she is. And then it's also like their story, and it's really beautiful. It's a really beautiful story about grief too, and loss, and life in general. And I love the historical aspect of it too. You go through a lot of like important times in history. Addie lives so many lives, and what she does with her abilities is really fascinating to me, and how she adjusts. It's really, really beautiful too. Like, there's a lot of sacrifice in it. I definitely give this 5 stars. Just, it was so beautiful. I highly recommend it. I thought the audiobook also was really good. Really, really well done. I highly recommend that. But yeah, 5 stars. I had so much fun this last year reading, more fun than I have in years. And I really am excited to continue this journey, and I'm already reading some really fun books. I'm having fun like joining all these like really meeting these cool people with these crazy communities. If you enjoyed this and you want to watch more of it, then subscribe, like this video. Let me know some of your guys' 5-star reads this year, and I'll see you guys later. Yeah, I hope you had fun.